Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me again for another episode in our Thursday mini coaching series. As you all know, my name is Tim, and I'm the career coach for the College of Science and Technology. But of course, the information I have will be applicable to all of you. The topic that we're going to talk about today is a question that I got from several different students. So I figured it was probably something that we should address. And the question was, how do we answer very common interview questions? Now, some of you guys will get common interview questions that are very specific to your degree or to your industry. So if you think like computer science, for example, you're probably going to get some technical questions, or there's going to be a technical portion of the interview. That is way outside my realm of expertise, but I can address the traditional and the behavioral type questions that you guys will be asked. To be fair, this video will probably take longer than 3 minutes simply because of the content, but it is important content, so I hope you guys don't mind. Now, the very first question, and it's not even a question, but the very first thing you'll be asked is tell me about yourself. And as you've seen in my other videos, the first 5 minutes of an interview are critical, and a lot of it rests on this question. And there's really the way you answer it. One is by practicing a lot before the interview. And there's a whole other video on that. But the way that you answer it is you really want to address three things. You want to talk about your education, your experience and skills, the relevant ones to that position, and then you want to talk about why you're applying to the position, those three areas. And you want to do it all in approximately a minute, sometimes a little bit longer, up to 1.5 minutes. You want to be clear and concise, to the point, and that keyword there is relevance, your relevant education, your relevant experience, your relevant skills. And then, of course, the research that you've done on the company and the position and why that position stands out to you. Two other really common questions you're going to get asked in interviews. One is going to say, give me one of your strengths, one of the things you think you're best at. Tell me about that. And the other side of that is tell me about one of your weaknesses. Now, the strengths question, I hope you guys know what your strengths are. So my advice there is to be honest, be authentic, as you should be doing with every answer. I think out of those two, the one that applicants have more challenge with is the weaknesses. What employers don't want to hear is a really cliche answer. Well, my weakness is I'm a perfectionist, or my weakness is I'm too focused. Oh, so you're a perfectionist. Every project I give you is going to be done perfectly, right? And you trap yourself. And that's an answer that a lot of people give because they're trying to conceal a strength as a weakness. And that's not what the employer wants to hear. What the employer wants to hear is an honest assessment of self. They want to know that you can criticize yourself in a constructive way and be honest with yourself about where your shortcomings are. And really what they want to hear is, what are you doing about it? What are you doing to make sure that that weakness doesn't get in the way of your performance? So if your weakness is time management, it's okay. My weakness is time management, but be sure that you have a follow-up section about why time management will not be an issue for that employer. Maybe you've developed a checklist system, or maybe you use Microsoft Outlook for reminders, or maybe you have a handwritten calendar that you always use to make sure you're on track. Whatever solution that you've identified to make sure that that's not an issue, that's really what they're looking at. Remember, one of the things employers want are employees that can think critically. And that weaknesses question is one of the ways they measure your ability to think critically. Can you think critically about your own shortcomings and develop solutions that prevent those shortcomings from getting in the way of your performance? Any good interview, moving forward, any good interviewer is going to measure your teamwork skills in some way. They may ask you a question, do you prefer to work alone or as part of a team? You can be honest here. If, in some areas you like to work alone and in some areas you like to work as part of a team, it's okay to say that. But you definitely want to address that working as part of a team is not an issue. Companies are getting more and more diverse, and employers want employees that they call it global fluency or global competency. They want employees that can work with a variety of individuals without an issue. And so they're going to assess for that in the interview questions they ask you. Another way that they may ask that question, they may say something like, tell me about a time where you had conflict on a team. Now, this kind of gets us into the more behavioral or scenario-based questions, and they almost always start off with that. Tell me about a time, or give me an example of, something like that. And they're kind of expecting a story. Now, the way that you want to craft that story, we call it the STAR method, situation, task, action, result, where you kind of share, here's the situation was, here's the task, this is what needed to be done, here's the action that I took, and here's the result. And if you craft your stories in that way, you're going to give them all the information that they need. Now, again, it's important here to be honest. I had a student come in once and say, well, Tim, I've never had any negative feedback. Well, and that's a very common question as well. Tell me about a time where you received negative feedback on your performance. And if you tell the employer, well, I've never received any negative feedback, they're either going to think that you can't accept negative feedback and cannot take it, or they're going to think that you're lying. And you don't want them to think either of those two things. So knowing the common interview questions before you go into an interview can really be helpful. Some other common ones, tell me about a time you had conflict on a team. Tell me about a time you had negative feedback on your performance. Tell me about a time where you had an irate customer. If you're going into a client-facing type job, is very common. Tell me about a time you either witnessed or were involved in something unethical. That one's very common. Now, this is the one area that this ethics question where not everybody has witnessed or been involved in something unethical. And so it's okay to say, well, thankfully that hasn't happened to me. But you still have to address what you would do in a situation where it would happen or did in the future. And the way to do that is to say something along the lines of, well, fortunately, that's never happened to me. But if I was in a situation where somebody was doing something unethical, the first thing I would do is this. The second thing I would do is this. Third thing is this. And have this process where you kind of explain your thought process when you witness someone doing something unethical. Maybe the first step is you talk to the person because maybe they don't know they're doing something unethical. Maybe they don't know it's outside of the company policy. And then if they continue the behavior, the second step is you go to their boss. Then if it's still not addressed, maybe the third step is you go to HR. And you have this sort of like path where you let the interviewer know that you know what to do in a situation like that. So those are all pretty common interview questions. I think something else that's very common in interviews is they'll say at the end, do you have any questions for me? And there's a whole nother video segment on that. But don't go in without questions. They're going to think you're not interested in the job if you get to the end and you say, hey, I don't have any questions for you. So you got to have questions for them. I'm trying to think, what are some other really, really common ones? I think those are the most common. Typically, they'll have a question to measure your motivation. What type of management style do you prefer? What motivates you? And here, I think being authentic and being sincere is really the best way to go. Don't try to manufacture something on the spot. I had a student once, well, Tim, I try to, change up my answers a little bit based on the facial expressions I see in the person interviewing me. And that's not a good strategy. I mean, you want to be sincere. You want to be honest. And you want them to see that because in the interview, they're trying to envision working side by side with you. And if they feel you're not being sincere, they feel you're not being honest, it's going to be very hard for them to do that. Different industries are going to have different questions. Some industries it'll be common for them to ask something just totally out of left field. And they'll say something like, is a hot dog a sandwich? Just a complete left field question. Again, they don't really care what your answer is here. They don't care if the answer is yes or no. What they care about is whether or not you can think on your feet and make an argument for an answer. And again, measuring that critical thinking skill. So be prepared for some stuff like that. That covers most of them. What I would suggest for you guys, if you need to strategize, if you need to practice, come see us. We have, banks and banks and banks of questions, all focused on interviewing for different industries. Again, mine are mostly CST related, but we have a coach for each college, and we can definitely practice with you guys as much as you want. And that actually reminds me, another question that's very common is, where do you see yourself in 3 years? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Questions like that, because they want to see, are you going to manage your career? That's a skill that they look for, career management. And they don't necessarily want someone who's just going to camp in that position. They want someone who's kind of forward thinking, who wants to advance. And for some people, you may not want to be with that company in 3 years. I would not advise saying that. Now, you don't want to lie to them. I will never suggest that you lie. But you can answer that question in a roundabout way. And you could say something like, well, in 3 years, I hope to be in a position that has more authority and more responsibility and that oversees larger projects, and kind of leave it at that. And then it's up to them at that point to hopefully over the 3 years, your performance, gives them the reasons to give you that type of responsibility, and your position can transition into a senior position at that company. But if it's not, you have to be prepared to go find that responsibility elsewhere. But what you don't want to say is, well, I want your job, or I'm going to be here for 2 years and then go get my doctorate, because now they're going to think, well, we're spending all this money trying to hire you. You're just going to leave us. So answering the question honestly, but sometimes in a little vague way, that question can be helpful. But guys, we are probably way over on time. So definitely, if you want more strategizing, like I said earlier, come see us. Set an appointment at Jobs for Gators, or give us a call, and let us know. Let us know how we can help. The best way to prepare for an interview is to practice, is to know what types of questions you're going to be asked, and that's where our specialty lies, one of our specialties. Here's my information. You can call me, email me, connect with me through Jobs for Gators. Like I said, there's a coach for each college, and you can definitely connect with your coach that way if it's not me. But guys, I hope you have a great Thursday and a great weekend. Hope you're all staying safe, and I will see you next week.